Can a single prize change the course of an entire season? How serious should it be a technical error for a legend like Hamilton to say that he lived his worst career? And what happens when a champion like Verstappen is accused of unsportsmanlike behavior that could cost his seat? During the classification, the British showed flashes of talent that has made him one of the greatest of all time. A fifth position on the grill was not despicable, especially if we consider the erratic performance of the SF25 in the two previous races. It was his best Saturday with Ferrari, and at times he talked about a possible assault on the podium. But since the lights went out, everything crumbled. The degradation of the rear tire was immediate, and the car simply did not respond. Just on Tour 10, he received a team order to give his position to Charles Leclerc. That call was much more than a tactical instruction. It was a tacit statement that the priority was not with him. His morals visibly broke. The race was a constant free fall. During the stops and boxes, he lost the position against both Mercedes, something that hurt doubly because it was his former team. Then came the final humiliation, to be advanced by a Sauber, that of Nico Hülkenberg, on the main line in the penultimate return. We talked about a car that in the test was considered the most limited of grid. That moment, recorded in slow chamber by the filmmakers, summed up cruelly but requires what had been their day: total impotence without reaction capacity or technical tools that would support it. In his post-carrier statements, Hamilton did not keep anything. He described the experience as the worst he has had in his career, an affirmation that acquires immense weight if we consider his almost 2 decades in the elite of motoring. His phrase, "I have no idea why it was so bad," evidenced not only its frustration, but a total bewilderment regarding the functioning of SF25. We talk about a pilot who has competed with difficult cars before, who has dealt with poor developments, but that had never been so explicit in his disapproval. When questioned about the positive aspects that could be extracted from the weekend, his response was lapidary: zero. A term that perfectly encapsulates impotence, emotional wear and technical disconnection that has begun to define its link with Ferrari. And not everything was the fault of the race. The problems began since before, in the third free practice, when the British reported failures in the gearbox. He said on the radio that the descending change did not work properly. That apparently lower failure was only the omen of a day in which nothing would work as it should. The team tried to solve it before the race, but everything indicates that the root of the problem was beyond a simple configuration. The truth is that the SF25, despite having taken Leclerc to the podium, showed a worrying technical inconsistency, with a completely unpredictable behavior depending on the driving style of the pilot. What is being revealed here is not only a little competitive car, but an absolute dissonance between the needs of a champion such as Hamilton and the reality of a project that promised more than I could deliver. The adaptation between pilot and machine has not fluid, and although Ferrari has one of the most complex and talented technical structures of the paddock, it gives the impression that they are building one more car based on Leclerc than the driving style of their new star signing. The 2025 Grand Prix will go down in history not only for the results in the general classification, but for a maneuver that ignited a media, sports, and ethical storm in the heart of Formula One. In Tour 64, in a critical area of the Catalan layout, Max Verstappen and George Russell starred in a high-voltage moment that was captured from all possible angles. What should have been an adjusted duel between two leading pilots became the beginning of a controversy that today threatens to change the course of the season, and even condition the reputation of the current world champion. Verstappen, who was pressured by an inconsistent performance of the RB21 in the last races, was engaged in a battle with Russell that already carried several laps, accumulating tension. The Mercedes pilot had shown a cleaner, more controlled line with better tractions and curve. Verstappen, meanwhile, seemed to push beyond the technical limit of Red Bull, visibly unbalanced in braking areas and stability problems in the most closed curves. All of that translated into a perfect context for error. But what happened was not a calculation error. At least not in the traditional sense. In a maneuver that for some was aggressive but within the regulation, and for others completely inadmissible, Verstappen closed Russell extremely just when he tried an overtaking abroad. There was no space, there was no exit margin. The Mercedes was forced to step outside the layout, losing control by millimeters, miraculously avoiding a high-speed collision. The maneuver was reviewed by the career address, but at that time no immediate sanction was imposed. However, that did not stop the wave of criticism. The radios lit furiously. Toto Wolff, head of Mercedes, was captured by saying that, "This is exactly what they told us was not acceptable this season." From Red Bull, total silence. Neither Christian Horner nor Helmut Marko offered immediate statements. an absence of comments that, in the world of F1, speaks even more than any official statement. In social networks and specialized forums, the images of the maneuver were repeated in loop. Experts analyzed every centimeter of the movement. The former pilots, today commentators, were divided. Some described him as dirty professional game. Others, more diplomats, described it as a defense to the limit. But the context is what aggravates everything. Max Verstappen is not a rookie who makes pressure errors. It is a tetracampion in the world, the referent of its team and one of the greatest exponents of this generation. His decision to risk so much at that time of the GP of Spain, when there were few laps and there was more to lose than win, he has raised serious questions about his mental state and the level of pressure he is supporting within the team, especially since Red Bull does not go through his best technical moment. With the recent degradation of Liam Lawson and the promotion of Tsunoda, internal tensions are at the limit. The RB21, although fast in lines, has proven to be difficult to drive in medium-speed curves, and Max has had to compensate with piloting what the car does not give it in stability. The most delicate thing is that this maneuver could have disciplinary consequences. The FIA has left open research open, which is not common except in particularly sensitive incidents. It is spoken in the paddock halls of a possible exemplary sanction, even of a suspension if it is considered that there was severe intentionality or negligence. It would be a devastating blow for Red Bull to lose his bad pilot in the middle of a season where they are already being surpassed by McLaren and pressured by Mercedes. And sanction would also open the door to a leadership crisis within the team, just when they need more stability. In parallel, George Russell has been morally strengthened from this incident. His behavior after the career was serene, professional, but with clarity that left no doubt. He affirmed that there are ways to run hard without putting others at risk, in a phrase that was interpreted as a direct message to Verstappen, without the need to name it. The community has greatly supported it, recognizing its ability to maintain control under pressure and its maturity in the face of a situation that could easily have climbed to a greater accident. To what extent is it allowed to compete aggressively? Where is the limit between firm defense and unsportsmanlike behavior? And more importantly, should the regulation adapt to prevent maneuvers thus repeating themselves, or are the risks on track already sufficiently punished? The magnitude of what happened in the 2025 Grand Prix cannot be analyzed in isolation. Its consequences are not limited to a lost podium, an aggressive overtaking, or a failed strategy. We are talking about an emotional and technical turning point that threatens to reconfigure the entire competitive map of the season. Because this was not another event in the calendar. It was a relentless mirror that showed each team and each pilot its true image, without filters or excuses. Ferrari, for example, now faces a silent internal storm. The performance difference between Leclerc and Hamilton in the same career not only evidences technical problems, but also strategic tensions. When a team orders to give position in Tour 10, it is sending an implicit message about its priorities. And although Leclerc ended up on the podium, the cost was to leave Hamilton to one of the worst experiences of his career. If Ferrari fails to correct that dissonance between pilots, it runs the risk of losing not only points, but the confidence of one of the most influential and analytical pilots of paddock. It is not just about performance but identity. Ferrari needs to decide if he wants to be a team built around a single pilot or if he can offer real equality without destroying his own internal dynamics. On the other hand, what happened between Verstappen and Russell exposes a growing crack inside Red Bull. The pressure was already accumulating with Liam Lawson's debacle and media pressure on the figure of Tsunoda as a substitute. But now, with Verstappen in the center of the controversy, the team faces an even more complex test. How to handle a pilot who has dominated the modern era but whose behavior begins to challenge the regulatory and ethical limits. And the most worrying thing is that Verstappen does not seem to have an environment that challenges it internally. Its untouchable status within Red Bull, consolidated for years of successes, puts it in a position where you can take disproportionate risks without receiving immediate correction. If the FIA decides to sanction it, the narrative will change completely. And if it does not, the message to the rest of the grill is clear. Extreme aggressiveness is still tolerated in certain contexts. That opens the door to an escalation of similar behaviors in future events, increasing risk and reducing sportsmanship. Mercedes, in this context, finds an unexpected opportunity. George Russell has emerged as a pilot who combines speed with maturity, and the image he left behind the incident with Verstappen has raised his profile. Mercedes knows that he is still far from McLaren in terms of pure career rhythm, but he has something that others are losing: coherence. With Kimi Antonelli progressing by firm steps, The German team is laying the foundations for a medium-term project that could exploit if the other two giants collapse under their own weight. And in the midst of all this, McLaren observes. The Woking team was not in the center of the storm in this Grand Prix, but that is precisely the most disturbing. While others face identity, leadership, or performance crisis, McLaren simply continues to add points with surgical efficiency. Norris leads the championship and Piastri is consolidated as an elite squire. Your car is not only fast but reliable. Its technical structure seems solid, and its strategy has been precise. If the current situation is maintained, they could build an unattainable advantage without the need for media or controversial battles on the track. But this also puts them in the sights, because now all teams know that McLaren is the rival to win. Do you think Max Verstappen's maneuver against George Russell was simply an aggressive defense or an irresponsible movement that should be sanctioned? Is Verstappen beginning to cross a dangerous line inside a team that does not seem willing to set limits? And what about Lewis Hamilton? Do you think that your signing by Ferrari is at risk of becoming a disappointment story in your career? Or are we barely seeing the beginning of a transformation that could reverse the script? Leave your analysis in the comments. What scenario do you see? Do you think Ferrari will keep Leclerc and Hamilton together without implicating how it has passed in its history? Can Red Bull sustain its internal structure with media pressure, changes in alignment, and an increasingly in the eye of the hurricane? Or will it be McLaren who, without making so much noise, ends up dominating this season effectively and without scandals? Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done so, because this is just the beginning.